Well, hello xenographers everywhere and welcome to another episode. Today we're going to look at a vintage lens that is quite simply the stuff of legend. It's one of the sharpest, best behaved and best engineered vintage lenses you can buy, the Olympus Zuiko 100mm f2. And many thanks to viewer and patron Martin Bowen for the loan of this lens. Thanks, Martin. I've wanted to try this lens for quite some time. I already have the much more common Olympus 100mm f2.8, a very nice lens that I've used a lot, so when the opportunity arose to use the f2 version, I was very keen to try it out. Here they are side by side, and we can immediately see that the f2 lens is much larger than the 2.8. There's clearly a lot of extra engineering gone on to accommodate that one extra stop. There are differences you can't see though, like the fact that the f2 uses extra low dispersion glass elements to aid light transmission and a floating rear element distinct from the main group to give sharper focusing up close. The f2, at least in terms of design and engineering, is a rather different animal to the 2.8. The f2 is a very sharp lens, both at the closest distance of 0.7 meters and at infinity, and wide open and stop down. It really is bitingly sharp, and with the exception of the Pentax 50mm f4 macro, it's one of the sharpest vintage lenses I've shot with. There's no doubt that this f2 from Olympus is an extremely sharp lens, but here's the thing, so is the 2.8. It too is bitingly sharp, both at infinity and its minimum focus distance of 1 meter, and wide open at f2.8 and stop down a bit. Try as I might, I just can't see any difference between them, and that really did surprise me. The f2 is 3 or 4 times the price of the 2.8, and I'd expected to easily see a significant difference in sharpness between them. However, I was ignoring the obvious, which is that the f2 lens at f2 is as sharp as the f2.8 lens is at f2.8, a whole extra stop. As well as that, the f2 lens is as sharp at 0.7 meters as the f2.8 is at 1 meter. Optically, that's quite an achievement, and that's where the extra engineering and cost went. Whether you really need that extra capability is open to question. Personally, I appreciate the elegant engineering of the f2 lens, and I like the 100mm focal length, so if I found a good one for the right price, I'd be very tempted. For the casual user though, as far as I can tell, the f2.8 is entirely as sharp as the f2. The f2 lens does show some vignetting, and wide open it's fairly heavy too. In shots with a bright background it's very obvious, and it can be quite unpleasant, making images that look a bit dismal, and f2 is probably best avoided in shots with a large bright background. However, it disappears if you stop down to f2.8 and everything is bright again. The f2.8 lens, perhaps because it's an f2.8 lens, shows only very minimal signs of vignetting with nice bright corners from wide open. Although it's not the most contrasty lens I've used, in most situations the f2 has good strong contrast, and it makes images with plenty of punch, depth and body. It falls off a little if there's a strong light source in the frame. That can sometimes be a pleasing effect and sometimes not, and it does seem to work better in black and white than it does in colour. There's a small built-in hood on this lens, but truth to tell, it doesn't seem to make that much difference. The f2.8 lens has a different character altogether. It's a low contrast lens that makes low contrast images. Personally, I quite like the low contrast look, though it does mean that with a strong light source in the frame, contrast will fall even lower, and in extreme circumstances, the images might not be usable. You can probably see by now that the f2 lens renders colours beautifully, just as most OM Zuiko lenses do. They're punchy, bold and saturated, just as I like them in fact. They really speak for themselves, and speaking personally, I couldn't really ask for nicer colour rendition in a lens. The f2.8 reproduces colours very nicely too, although they're of a different character because the lens has a lower contrast. They're softer and gentler, less punchy and altogether more restrained. I do like what it does with colour, but if you must have your colours punchy, the f2 might be better for you. Background blur on both these lenses is, as you'd expect, enormous, soft, creamy and dreamy up close, giving plenty of separation at longer distances. The f2 with its extra stop gives more separation, though subjects stand out that bit more and images are generally that bit less flat. But this is all to be expected. Where these lenses really differ in terms of background blur is the quality of the blur. The f2.8 is smooth for much of the time, but like most vintage lenses, there are points where it becomes distinctly nervous, jittery and a little bit busy. But blur from the f2 is super smooth at any distance. It's unflappable and is unfazed by anything you throw its way. I've lost count of how many lenses I've shot over the past couple of years, but this one I think beats them all for continuous smoothness of background blur. Shoot what you like, where you like, when you like, in any situation you can think of. Blur from this lens will remain smooth, calm and unruffled. Even a series of straight lines, usually a guarantee of very harsh blur, will not unsettle this lens, and everything remains smooth. As far as cost goes, well, there is quite a difference. A good copy of the 2.8 will cost around £150, whereas a good f2 lens will cost around £600 to £700. At first glance, this might seem like a no-brainer. Who wouldn't buy the 2.8? It's a great lens that makes great images and does almost everything the f2 does. Remember though, that improving on a great lens means small increments of improvement, something I found when comparing the 50mm f2 Jupiter 8 with the 50mm f2 Leica Summit R. The Leica beat the Jupiter, but only by a small margin, and this is a similar case. That small margin of improvement requires time, ingenuity, and new and better materials, which, to you and I, translates as cost. As the old adage has it, you get what you pay for. So, is the f2 worth the extra 400 quid? To the casual user, probably not. But if you use this focal length a lot, if you're really serious about photography, or if you just appreciate exquisite lenses, if you can afford it, then I think it most certainly is worth it. This lens, in my experience at least, is unparalleled. So that's it from me for now. Please don't forget to like, subscribe and ring the bell before you go. And if you like the content on this channel and you want to support it, you can do so at patreon.com/Zenography. As ever, thank you very much for watching, and I will see you next time for some more Zenography.